Annyeonghaseyo. In Korean, this literally translates to, have you eaten? After the devastating aftermath of World War II and then the Korean War, starvation was rampant. If you had eaten that day, it meant you were doing well. In the present day, annyeonghaseyo simply means, how are you? As I mentioned in an earlier speech, I was adopted from South Korea when I was only 6 months old, and I've since been back to Korea multiple times, and I'd love to share with you a few things I've learned along the way. First, I want to share with you a couple of cultural norms I've picked up on. Second, I want to tell you about traditional Korean food, and lastly, I want to share with you a little bit about present-day Korea. Age is extremely important in Korean culture, as in respecting your elders. Often, the transit system is extremely crowded, and it's not uncommon for a teenager to move out of his or her seat and trade it with an elderly man or woman, if the elderly man or woman is standing, obviously. That is the respectful and traditional thing to do in Korean culture. The other cultural norm I found extremely interesting is that there's no word for sorry in the Korean language. On the crowded buses or streets of Korea, you'll often get bumped into, you'll get shoved, and you won't even get a second glance because it isn't proper. Don't be surprised if you also get a friendly hug or a big pat on the back too, because Koreans just don't have any personal space bubbles. I've even been called fat to my face, and no apology, no second thoughts, nothing, because they're not worried about offending anyone and certainly not concerned with saying you're sorry. And also, as I mentioned earlier, food is an extremely important part of Korean culture. Traditionally, you'll take your shoes off when you go to eat at someone's house or a restaurant, and you'll put on slippers if they have them. You'll sit on the ground on a cushion, sometimes not on a cushion because they won't have them. And in front of you will be a little plate with chopsticks and long stem spoons, and you'll start the meal with little side dishes. They're about this big, and they'll be 10 to 12, sometimes more, sometimes less, and they'll be filled with lots of different foods. We'll have tofu, radishes, kimchi, sprouts, soybeans, just a lot of different things. It rotates too, so sometimes there'll be fish or fish eggs or something. And following the side dishes will be a meat or a fish dish accompanied with rice and then a stew of some sort, some kind of soup to dip your rice in. And a few of my favorite Korean foods are bulgogi, kimbap, and kimchi. And bulgogi is a really thinly shredded beef marinated in like garlic, pepper, sesame oil, and a lot of different ingredients, and it's absolutely outstanding. It tastes so good. I think they also put brown sugar in the marinade. Kimchi is a fermented cabbage, and yes, that does mean rotten, so it is rotten cabbage, but trust me, it's delicious. And then kimbap is, it's like sushi, but it doesn't have the raw fish in it. It does have the seaweed with the rice, and then there'll be radish, cucumber, egg sometimes, and carrots. So that's also very good because I don't eat fish, so it's really the perfect thing for me. And luckily, all of my favorite foods in Korea are like a staple to their diet. Although beef is a lot more expensive than pork is, so if you go there, you'll often see pork chosen over beef, just simply because it's cheaper. And other things that have changed in Korea nowadays are, according to Boston College, we're now the leading country in science and technology. Being connected is extremely important in Korean culture. Anywhere you go, you'll be able to connect to Wi-Fi for free because they love their internet. And the other present day change I've seen, which is extremely interesting, is the Americanization of women, particularly because you'll be walking down the streets and you'll see lots of tall, skinny, blonde mannequins, and pretty much exactly like you'd imagine like a blonde model in America, because women strive to be like American women. So that is their ideal image of what an American woman looks like. But anyway, Koreans are very patriotic and they support their homeland. I hope I've shown you my pride and passion for my country by first telling you about cultural norms, then sharing with you a few of my favorite foods, and lastly updating you on what present day Korea is like. I sure hope I can in the future give another update about the reunification of North and South Korea.